Hello and welcome to Focus 54, your guide to real African news. I'm your host, Prudence on Rwanda. Today we continue our discussion on the DRC Rwanda conflict. In our previous episode, we examined the US brokered peace deal and concluded that Africa must rely on its own institutions to resolve its own challenges. Now we take a deeper look to what needs to happen next. We'll be following updates from the 47th Ordinary Session of the African Union Executive Council, which took place from the 10th up to the 11th of July 2025 in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, under the theme Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. This theme reaffirms our conversation on the DRC Rwanda crisis through the lens of reparatory justice, calling for structural redress and durable transformation rooted in Agenda 2063. How can African-led frameworks, not external actors, apply to address systematic inequalities, historical grievances, and build lasting peace across the Great Lakes? An international relations expert, Clive Chiridza, will be joining us in the second segment for the discussion. But first, let's take a look at the stories making the headlines around the continent. We kickstart with South Africa. A political analyst from the University of Johannesburg slammed Donald Trump in an interview recorded on Wednesday, describing him as a conman as the US president hosts 5 African leaders. The analyst also argued that the US brokered a peace deal between the DRC and Rwanda to secure access to minerals. We move on to Nigeria, where the Nigerian economic financial experts criticized US President Donald Trump on his suggested 10% tariff increase on BRICS nations. Moving on to Ethiopia, on the same issue, the Ethiopian ambassador to Brazil, Tedesse, stated on Monday that his country joined the BRICS bloc in January 2024 with the aim of diversifying partnerships, emphasizing that this does not mean abandoning its traditional allies. The ambassador also pointed out that BRICS countries, particularly China, share a robust partnership with Ethiopia, and most African countries noting that trade, investment, and tourism between the nations are very good and want to deepen. That's all we had for you in this segment. Do join us in the second segment as we will continue discussing on the DRC Rwanda peace deal process. Welcome back to the second segment. I'm still your host, Prudence Mutimbanyoka. We are now joined by Clive Chiridza, an international relations expert. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, tapping to our discussion today, the US brokered peace deal was largely absent of African leadership and the risks aligning continental frameworks. How can the African Union and other regional bodies reassert their leadership in the DRC Rwanda peace process and again ensure that African-led mechanisms rather than external powers are driving the resolution?
That is a very important question indeed. I think for starters, African leaders themselves need to simply realize their position and also acknowledge the fact that Africa itself in this instance is not simply a pawn in this chess game, but actually the chessboard itself. Yes. Right. So it starts on realizing. And then secondly, we need to also invoke policy blueprints which are binding, present, and even current. As an example, I'll take you through, say, the African Union Agenda 2063 blueprint. It also talks about strengthening African institutions, and henceforth the gist of the matter or of this guiding document is to allow Africa to fully manage its own affairs. Secondly, we could also, borrow from the precepts of the APSA, which is the African Peace and Security Architecture document, a very important document which speaks to the need for Africa to detect conflict, prevent conflict, set up dialogue platforms, mediations, etc. etc.
But does Africa have the potential of those early warning systems?
Definitely. The presence of these guiding documents means there was a thought process that was put into this. And you know what? I know probably your next question could be, or rather could be a critique to my opinions based on the aspect or principle of sovereignty. But let me say this. The union, or rather the diplomatic intercourse between policy and sovereignty has so far proven to be, in quotes, ejaculatory and obviously sweet, procreative, and also leading to conception. I will give you an example of AMISOM intervention in Somalia way back in the early 2000s, as well as probably the intervention of ECOWAS in Gambia. That was in 2017 when there was a post-election impasse, a highly, sensitive political situation there. But the intercourse between the two, policy, sovereignty, yielded a positive result and outcome.
So are you saying Trump or maybe the US did not give Africa the chance to resolve its own issues?
No. It could be vice versa, in my opinion. Probably in this case, it's Africa that didn't give Africa a chance to resolve its own issues.
How so?
Why do I say so? Simply because, remember, it was President Tshisekedi himself, the DRC president, who approached Trump with this idea and notion, never the vice versa.
All right.
Yes.
So we understand that decades of armed conflict in the Eastern Congo have been fueled by unresolved rebel activity. What role can Agenda 2063's silencing the guns roadmap play in establishing a binding regional framework for the DDR? Okay.
Silencing the guns roadmap is simply an African Union Agenda 2063 flagship, which strives to achieve peace and security in Africa. In fact, it strives to ameliorate and even eliminate, eradicate wars, civil wars, impasse in Africa. And to achieve this framework brings important initiatives in the form of, number one, demobilization, which speaks to maybe a change or alteration of rebel grouping structures. Number two, it also speaks to disarmament, which means removing the tools of war. It also speaks to reintegration, which speaks to the social and economic inclusion of the combatants into society. It also goes on further to encourage dialogue, or rather what I can call alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, encompassed by negotiation, arbitration, the good name, mediation, etc., etc.
So many previous deals, like in Lusaka, Sun City, Nairobi, faltered due to lack of enforcement and grassroots inclusion. What accountability mechanisms can African leaders put in place to ensure that peace agreements are not just political statements, but the real deal?
Okay. On that one, we really have to talk or consider many things. Number one, there has to be a set-up of monitoring independent bodies. For example, there could be an advocacy for the inclusion of NGOs or even the United Nations to also assist in oversight. Secondly, we can also talk about the enaction of enforcement mechanisms where there can be a setup of sanctions as well as penalties in cases where there is no compliance. And also, we could go legal as well, set up, legal enactions to guide actions, to guide policy. Very, very, very important. And also, you as the fifth estate, the media, we also need your role in this regard. In what way? Fair reporting, exposing illicit actions, and that alone brings about checks and balances. However, we cannot do away with, the inclusion of the civil society. We will need our community leaders. We would also need even the religious leaders to make sure the grassroots themselves own these solutions. We could go further and further and talk about, frequent reviews as well.
Do we have other instances like in the region where what you're talking about has been practiced and has been successful?
Yeah, it has actually happened. I'll give you an example of Zimbabwe itself. We go back to year 2008. Remember, that was a year when there was strife in our political setup. But what then happened? Reconciliation bodies were set up, the good name mediation tactics. Thabo Mbeki, we saw him coming here. It was that oversight. And what happened? A successful, political resolution of a conflict. So, yeah.
Okay, so we're saying peaceful resolutions can only be concluded when the state or the parties involved include the marginalized communities and the marginalized people.
Exactly.
Join us in our third segment for more on this discussion. Stay tuned. Welcome to the third and final segment of Focus 54. I'm still your host, Prudence Mutimbanyoka. And Clive is still with us as we continue to discuss the DRC Rwanda peace deal. In light of Rwanda casting doubt on the US brokered deal, what confidence-building measures can be initiated between Kigali and Kinshasa to rebuild trust? That's including joint military de-escalation zones, open diplomacy, and people-to-people exchanges.
Okay. I think you've mentioned it all. Key there would be, invoking diplomacy, which comes with a package of, say, cultural exchange, people-to-people discussions, academic, intercourse between the two countries, the institutions of the two countries, as well as coming up with business pacts between companies, corporates of the two nations. But importantly, it's also key and imperative for us to then take cognizance of the fact that inclusion of all parties would be very, very key. I will take you back to that Washington Accord where the deal was brokered in Washington in the US between DRC itself and Rwanda. You will notice that if you look into the substantive elements of that accord, it actually excludes the grassroots, the people, the victims, the communities. They are excluded. Why? Because three high sounding elements come out of that deal. Number one, it talks much about the withdrawal of Rwandan forces from DRC within a period of 90 days. Secondly, it also places emphasis on the cessation of funding or sponsorship to M23. Thirdly, if you are to notice, it also speaks to a setting up of a regional economic community system involving the US and DRC, a mineral exchange for security deal, and all those elements speak less or nothing to the individual per se. Yeah,
all right.
It's not person centered.
So while Africa has the necessary infrastructure, the real challenge lies in the political will and coordination. How can African leaders leverage the African peace and security architecture to establish a standing regional rapid response unit or mediator panel for emerging cross-border conflicts such as the DRC Rwanda dispute?
Like I said before, it then takes the African leaders, African institutions to realize their worth, to realize their importance. It then also takes us to go back into our guiding documents, as mentioned earlier, which at the end of the day they bring an element of, promoting a self-reliant Africa, an Africa that is able to solve its own affairs, an Africa that then dwells much on the old-time adage, African solutions can only be solved by African problems. It takes us to be masters of our own destiny, and the infrastructure, the software is actually present. All that we need to do is to take a bold step towards the implementation. Remember, we have the African Union itself. We also even have the SADC, IAC. We even have, in the Great Lakes region, there is the International Conference of the Great Lakes region as the most important, regional organization present in there, which places primacy on us coming up with solutions from, African roots. Yeah, because we as Africans ourselves, we understand better the intricacies of some of our conflicts.
Okay,
yes.
Just out of interest, do you think there can be mechanisms to reinforce the political will in our leaders?
Definitely, it's there. The presence of regional bodies themselves proves that there is, this motivation and inspiration for collaboration for the African cause. There's a reason why we had the OAU, cum AU, supported by the various African regional, bodies. It's proof that we need one another. It's proof that something in within us motivates us to work together to achieve, those goals and obligations.
And do you think these goals are achievable?
Very much achievable.
How so?
Through mediation, as said before.
All right.
Through conciliation, through arbitration.
All right.
Exactly.
All right. So minerals such as coltan, cobalt, and gold are at the heart of DRC's conflict.
Definitely.
The unregulated extraction and illegal trade of these minerals continue to finance armed groups, exacerbate insecurity, and attract exploitative foreign interest. Despite abundant mineral wealth, the DRC and the region as a whole remain trapped in these cycles of violence and underdevelopment due to poor governance, weak regulatory frameworks, and lack of value addition within Africa. So with that history, how should African states address the economic drivers of a conflict, particularly the unregulated extraction and illicit trade?
I think primarily we have to make sure true peace reigns amongst us as Africans. And when I say true peace, and then it automatically means that there is false peace as well. Which is true peace? We have to borrow that from the tenets of the Augustinian, the confines of peace, which has to include truth, reconciliation, justice, fairness, transparency, openness, and inclusiveness. That is number one. And number two, to also address those, economic drivers of illicit trades. We then have to also, borrow from Walter Rodney. He gave us an important formula with regards to economic development. He told us what we should do when we extract the minerals. He advises us to make sure we turn them into usable tools that speaks to technology. He also, encouraged us to make sure we manage our work well. Thirdly, it would be also very important for us to then add on beneficiation, value addition to our raw materials, other than us relying or rather depending on the Westerners in as much as our raw materials is concerned.
Or rather exporting them
exactly raw. Yeah. That again leads to trade deficits, or rather negative balance of payments. Yeah.
What institutional reforms should be prioritized in both Rwanda and DRC, or such as security sector reform, judicial independence, and land governance to foster internal stability and prevent external manipulation of domestic weaknesses?
We then have to focus on security sector reform. We are saying the Rwandan and DRC military and police should be professionalized, well trained, and also we have to then look at issues that have to do with diplomacy and even etiquette in our institutions. We also have to, improvise on judicial independence for fair judgments. I think that is my take.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure being here.
That's all we had for you tonight as far as the U.S. brokered peace deal between the DRC and Rwanda. I hope you gained some insights during this discussion. Do join us same place, same time next week. I'm Prudence Mutimbanyoka. Stay blessed.